Welcome back to Fresh Rubber. And Gav, have you just witnessed the wildest race you've seen in a long time?
I have just witnessed the wildest race. It had more twists and turns than an Agatha Christie novel. It was just like, are we getting rain? Are we not getting rain? Like, what is this tyre strategy at the beginning? There's so much to get into on this race. I almost can't kind of wrap my head around what I've just witnessed. Yeah, how did you feel about it? Did you enjoy it? Before we go on, I'm going to say I loved it and I kind of hated it at the same time. And I can't remember a race where I was like kind of enthralled and also kind of absolutely appalled at everything that happened. How do you respond to that?
Well, the bad behaviour was on show on many fronts. There were so many penalties being dished out. We can talk about them. There were so many poor decisions being made when it comes to strategy, or let's say wheel-to-wheel racing. There was so much potential for drama in this, and some of that eventuated. There was the rain that kind of didn't show up, but it was lingering as a looming threat. But it dummied at least one team into making a poor decision on the strategy front. And I would say that the rain or the weather at the Grand Prix was almost like the 23rd car. It was like the joker in the pack for this race. Because when you think about it, say if we jump into tyre strategy, the McLarens made the most bizarre call to start the race on intermediate tyres, preparing for rain that never came. And because of that, they both ended up back in the midfield. So they had to change tyres. Lando Norris got a great start. He was in the lead temporarily, but then he had to pit because obviously it was the wrong tyre choice on a bone dry track. And Oscar Piastri pitted early, came out in the midst of the carbon fibre zone, punted Alex Albon, which left carbon fibre all over the track. It ended the race for Alex Albon. It created a virtual safety car. It was just like, why? Rain that didn't come, that spooked a team into choosing the worst tyre choice, and they went from being third and fourth on the grid to being in no man's land. I mean, it was just bizarre to see. And I think after the race...
It was the race that McLaren threw away. Like, I can't think of a more disastrous race for McLaren apart from the infamous plank wear of last year, where they both rode their cars too low, did absolutely amazing in the race, and then, had guilty looks on their faces, slowed down towards the end, and it turned out that they'd ridden their cars too low, and both Oscar and Lando got disqualified. That is peak. That's peak failure from a team. But this was like not far away, in the sense that, as you say, Jace, the rain didn't come and they were on inters. To be fair, there were a few other teams that were also on inters. I think Haas and Audi also went out on inters. So what I imagine happened in that moment was that their weather experts on some of those teams were saying that rain was coming. But I remember seeing Stella on the pit wall just kind of look over his shoulder, look and kind of look down at the track, and it's just bone dry, and they're on inters. Piastri on the radio kind of going like, guys, I think we've made a real mistake here. And just like, you realize in that moment that their race is, in terms of like finishing on the podium, it's almost impossible now, because exactly what we expected to happen happened. And on lap 3, they both had to come in and change onto the slicks. It was a disaster. But not just that for I would say like the disaster of McLaren on this race started there and then just continued through the whole race, right? We had, like you say, we had Piastri going into the side of Albon and just like getting a 10-second penalty and writing off Albon's car. We had Lando mowing the grass, having to come into the pits to get grass literally pulled out of his side pod. Then we had Lando DNF. His engine just sounded like a cutlery drawer of, kind of knives and forks clunking to a stop. It couldn't have been worse for McLaren. That was just one part of the story, though. That was what.
And
There was-
Didn't Piastri get a penalty for speeding in the pit lane
got a
as
10,
well? Just
got another penalty. He got 10 seconds for running into poor old Albon, and then he got another 5 seconds for speeding in the pit lane. It was their worst. It was terrible. It was terrible for McLaren.
and it for Norris, it sort of continues a long run of failing to finish the Canadian Grand Prix. If you remember last year,
Oh my gosh.
he crashed into the back of Piastri.
Yeah.
And then 2 years before that, he had a suspension failure or a puncture on the start-finish straight. So Lando Norris just has like some kind of gremlin that says it's not going to allow him to finish this race in any way, shape, or form, let alone at the back. Oh, but it was just like, it was absolutely amateur hour. And that's, as you say, that's just one team. So the other thing about McLaren is that they had two opportunities to fix the problem because Arvid Lindblad had some kind of mechanical failure on the grid, and so he wasn't even able to get away at the start. So they had 2 extra formation laps where they could have come in and pitted for the slick tyres, which would have been the smart choice.
Wait,
It's like,
explain this to me though. Like, within a formation lap, had they done that, like, could they have come in, pitted, changed for slicks, and then resume their place on the grid? Are they allowed to?
no, they can't go back. So they would have been starting from the pit lane behind Stroll. So it would have been a fail. But on the first lap of the race, that's when the cars are all bunched up the most. So if they would have been joining from the back, they would have been joining at the closest point where the cars are all bunched up the most.
Yeah.
They would have lost less time. Yeah, and as it was also when you pit under racing conditions, the other cars are driving past. So you have to play catch up again. So it wouldn't have been optimal, of course. It would have been better to just choose the right tyre at the right time.
Yeah.
But it would have been worse than what they actually did. But the other big one for me that was it was like this close to disaster was also very exciting and full of drama, which was seeing Kimi Antonelli and George Russell have at it for nearly 30 laps, trading blows, sometimes getting ahead, sometimes making mistakes, dropping back, racing with other cars around them because some cars had pitted, so there were actually back markers in the first stint that they had to deal with, which is usually what you only deal with at the end of the race. And almost taking each other out, Kimi Antonelli locking up massively, nearly coming into the back of his teammate. Was that not just absolute peak drama for those two taking blows and giving each other hell as they were going around the circuit at Gilles Villeneuve today? Was that just not the most amazing drama?
It was absolutely electric, and it kind of comes off the back of the sprint race where, you know, obviously Antonelli, you know, getting super upset and completely losing it. Toto going on the radio telling him to calm down, to not talk about it on the radio, to like focus on driving, to basically shut up and drive. It also comes off the back of like Toto having to kind of go into the interview pen and kind of explain that they've talked it through, everything's cool, they understand the rules of engagement, and it's like, there is nothing about this that speaks of certainly Kimi understanding the rules of engagement. It was absolutely nuts. They made contact. Kimi was just like, it's so fascinating. Like, I think I really saw that actually, like, Kimi is actually much more of a Max Verstappen, and actually George is probably more of a Lewis Hamilton, if you kind of want to paint broad strokes. I was really sad for George today because, you know, I'm not the biggest George fan. Like, I find him a bit annoying, as I think many people do. But like, you can't say he's not considered and consistent. And you've got this young buck, this spicy little chili pepper, just flying in, you know, kind of like threatening to take you both out again the very next day after he'd just done it. And just ferociously dive bombing and kind of, you know, do you know what it felt like? It felt like a drag race, didn't it, down that back straight? There was moments, some of these incredible shots where they were wheel to wheel. It's like literally, who is going to blink first? Who's going to brake last? And we know these cars, the whole thing of harvesting is that you kind of slow down into corners and harvest and super clip, but not today. They were like, the very last breaking point you could take. They were taking. It was exhilarating. I was lap 30. George's car, crumbles a bit like Lando. Something goes terribly wrong with the power unit. And that's why I felt so sad. I was like, I want to see this for another 30 laps. And all we got to see, we only got halfway through the race before George's car failed. That was sad to me.
Yeah, it felt a lot like all the energy kind of left the race.
Left the race for sure.
Yeah. And I think you can contrast this with the races that we've seen so far, where it's been, say, Lewis and George. Two different teams going wheel to wheel, or George and Charles Leclerc, where they have this kind of leapfrog dynamic where one will get ahead, but then through battery deployment, the other one will get it back on the next straight or the next lap. I remember in Australia, we had the first 6 or so laps of the race, they had a different leader of the race every lap. And it was this kind of yo-yo strategy game almost about how you can use the battery best. But with these two Mercedes drivers, they have the same machinery. They have the same package. They essentially have the same car. So they weren't really seemingly able to make that kind of play stick. And they were pretty much bang on, like stuck to each other like glue within a second for that entire 30-lap window. And that was amazing. The thing that really made the difference was the mistakes and the bravery. Mistakes and bravery. And there were times where, one moment where Kimi got ahead and I thought, oh, okay, he's got it. He's going to get off down the road. George, eat my dust. But then Kimi moving into turn 10, and then you throw it all out again and Russell's ahead. And it was just, as you say, it was electric. And when it came to a grinding halt with a very sad, rightly so, George Russell throwing his toys out the pram on the side of the road, it was a little bit like, oh, okay. The only drama then is maybe Kimi's car is going to do the same, and that will hand the win to either Verstappen or Hamilton. But wasn't to be.
Did you hear on lap 29? I don't know if it was Bono. I don't know whose race engineer, whether it was Kimi's, or you might be able to tell me whether it was Kimi's or George's. But he said this kind of slightly strange thing. He said, both cars are under investigation. Do you remember that moment? So lap 29, I think it might have been Bono said to Kimi, both cars are under investigation. And Martin Brundle's just kind of like, I can't see anything either of these cars have done to be under investigation. I wonder if that's a coded secret team message. And then one lap later, George's car DNF'd, the power unit blew up. And so I wonder, when he said both cars are under investigation, what that team message actually means is we're seeing some data in the cars that's showing signs of there's problems with the cars, and that actually Kimi might have actually been lucky to finish that race, whereas George wasn't. That's what I think maybe happened there. But yeah, like fascinating. So I've got in my notes here, at that exact moment, lap 30, George's car blows up. All the fun is gone from this race. But then I had to eat my own words, because then we had Leclerc and Hadjar, and then we had the most incredible Max and Lewis showdown. So actually the race wasn't sure. Kimi sailed off into the sunset, but we had 2 fantastic races after that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there was like a little lull period between lap 30 and maybe lap 40 where you sort of thought, I guess I could turn it off at this point. That's a bit dull. I hope it's going to pick up from here. But as you say, that it did. And I don't know, like Hadjar,
he's a naughty boy. He was a naughty boy today, wasn't
he? You say the stewards were investigating. Maybe Bono just read it wrong, because they certainly were investigating a lot of bad behavior throughout the race.
Yeah.
And Hadjar was at the center of a lot of that. Hadjar, I don't know, I guess this is maybe like partially sophomore rookie energy. He really wants to make a mark. He's in that second Red Bull seat. He's there. He doesn't want to become the next Yuki Tsunoda. He doesn't want that outcome. So I think he's like, I'm here. We're in a midfield car. It's my time to shine. And if I can keep a Ferrari behind me, then that really makes me look good. That sort of distinguishes me in some way. But then the way he chose to try and do it
was totally Yuki.
Totally illegal. Nearly put Leclerc into the wall. And it was like, okay, mate, that's not quite the right way. I see what you're trying to do, but actually that's the wrong way to go about doing it.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was, because this was such a bonkers race, he served something like 35 seconds worth of time penalties, and he still came out ahead. He came out ahead of Franco Colapinto.
He had,
I think, because of
so much
safety car timing.
So much time on his hands to like burn through the penalties. It's like, it's hilarious. Like, even just thinking,
it's like this. Yeah, I can do penalties. Bro.
I can do 5 penalties and still keep my place. I'm going to do all those penalties. It's funny, isn't it? Because I was thinking about poor Alex Albon with Oscar taking him out of the race, and it's a funny thing about F1 that you can literally run into the side of someone, put a hole in their side pod, take them out of the race entirely, and you get a 10-second penalty and get to keep racing. It's one of the beautifully. There's many things I think are beautifully unfair about F1, and that is one thing that is beautifully unfair. But no, I think, the Hadjar Leclerc battle was fun. It was exciting. Hadjar was a naughty boy. But, oh my goodness, the Hamilton Verstappen fight was just as exciting as George and Kimi, I thought.
That was like classic F1.
Yeah.
That battle with Lewis and Max, because it's sort of the culmination of the race. It's the end of the race. They're having to dodge back markers. They're getting out of the way. But there's this thing if you go back and watch a race from the 90s, if you ever get bored, watch an old 90s race, time and time again, the back markers getting in the way was actually what decided the race outcome. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily just driver skill. There's plenty of that. But back marker shenanigans was a big differentiator when it came to the 90s F1. And it had that kind of essence. And it was like Hamilton just had this kind of drive and energy. He had this can-do thing. He had the bit between his teeth, and he was going to make it happen. And he was saying, I'm pushing, we can make this happen, it's amazing, I'm going to do it. And off he goes, charging after Max Verstappen. I think there was a gap of about 5 or 6 seconds by that point. He manages to close on up. 7 seconds. So he closes down 7 seconds. Max has got some issues. So he's not fully happy. His shopping trolley isn't really performing the way he wants it to be. And he wishes he was back at the Nürburgring. But Max is managing to hold him off, and he closes up to about 1 second, or in that 1 second magic zone. And for, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 laps.
An eternity.
He's just stuck there. He can't do it. And even Brundle said at one point, I think he's kind of petered out. It hasn't eventuated.
Yeah.
But what happened then, Gav? What happened after that?
He took him.
Round the outside, turn 1. This is such an amazing move for Hamilton to go round the outside of turn 1 against Max Verstappen. I remember in the lead up to this race, I watched a highlight of Nico Rosberg trying to go around the outside of Max Verstappen at turn 1 in Canada, and Max just had nothing to do with it. He sort of, last of the late breakers, classic Max, just pushed him off. But Hamilton
and George
got it done.
George pushed Kimi off in exactly the same fashion, right? Mm-hmm. Yesterday in the sprint. It was
that was mega.
Listen, that was a moment for Lewis, and like a moment that I've been desperate to see. I think we've talked about it for all 5 of these races of this season so far, is that, Lewis shows pace. Leclerc sits there and just waits for Lewis to burn his tyres out, kind of pushing, and then slips in like he did yesterday in the sprint and just takes the position back. Finally, we saw Lewis somehow, and I don't quite know how, just decide that wasn't going to happen today, and turn his raw pace into an actual podium position and beat his teammate. And I think that was huge. And then, the battle between Max and Lewis was electric. I think what was really interesting is like you said, Jace, Lewis closed down 7 seconds on Max, right? But then when when he arrived on the scene of the crime, it took him like another 7 or 8 laps to even get past him. There's something about Max that's like, okay, you can close a 7-second gap on me, but if you get close to me, I will fight you to the death. And I actually didn't think Lewis could do it, and then he did. So that was absolutely thrilling.
Same.
I think they crossed the line with Max 0.4 of a second behind Lewis. I mean, like literally the time it takes for us to take a breath, like that's how close it was. So it was just nuts.
There were times today when, and I think this is like the champion's mentality, and you can say that Max has got it as well, where closing on up, the classic phrase, you can catch, but can you pass?
Yeah.
Passing is another thing altogether.
Yeah.
And there would have been times, I kind of picture myself in that position in the race car at times, and I don't have that champion mentality. I would think, nah, I caught up to him, but I just couldn't get it done. But Lewis just isn't willing to accept close enough. He wants to get it done and finally finish second in Canada. And while we're on Lewis, the interview, post-race interview, was with Heikki Kovalainen. I don't know if you remember this, Gav, but he was Lewis's teammate the year he won his first championship.
I didn't know that.
Heikki Kovalainen drove for McLaren and was Lewis Hamilton's teammate. So I don't know if you noticed at the interview, they were like, "Oh, so good to see you, man! So good to see you! Big hugs." That's why, because Heikki Kovalainen, the guy interviewing him at the end of the race, literally 15 years earlier, was his teammate at McLaren when he won his first championship.
That's so awesome. I love that. Well, look, we're now in a situation. I think George is weirdly in a situation now where he's kind of in a Lando moment. Remember last year with Lando and Piastri? Piastri ran away with the first half of the season. Kind of got, I don't know how many points ahead, if you can remember. He was
33.
33. Okay, we're in a worse situation than Lando was in.
Yeah.
Lando had a DNF, just like George has had. So we've got George in a Lando situation because his teammate is now 43 points ahead of him, and he's had a DNF through no fault of his own. Regardless of whether he'd finished first or second today, it would have been close. Like, had George finished first today, I think, he would have been, Kimi only would have been 11 points ahead of him. Had he finished second, you do the math, kind of 14, 15. So we've gone from like 11 or 15 with this DNF to 43 points. This is a profound moment for George. Like, do you think, Jace, that George can do a Lando going forward into Europe? Now, we do know that Kimi had an absolute shocker, as you've kind of pointed out a number of times, on the European leg of the Tour last year. Do you think George can pull this back and actually have a fight with Kimi? Or do you think Kimi just runs away with it now? 43 points.
I think there's a few questions here. Do we think Kimi can overcome his European jitters, mid-season jitters from last year? Will we see a repeat of that return to poor form? I don't think so. I think he's on form. 4 wins in a row. He's the first person in F1 history to win his first 4 races consecutively. He's the youngest ever Drivers' World Champion leader, blah, blah, blah. He's been compared to the greats. Ascari, Fangio, like that. It's just insane.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't think Kimi's going to falter. But yes, I do think George has got it in him. I think there's more than enough races for him to claw back that deficit. 43 points is a lot, but just as easily it could have been Kimi's car that conked out. If Kimi had failed to finish, then George would have been ahead.
Yeah.
So I think there's in this game, and it's one of those things that's unfair to both, but it can be unfairly distributed unfairness. So George could have more gremlins throughout the year. He's had plenty of gremlins already so far in the season, and he said afterwards he doesn't feel like he could do anything more to have had a better outcome this weekend, and I think that's true. I think George it's no way near time for him to sort of throw in the towel or think this is a runaway deal. But what might be difficult for him to manage mentally and also within the team is how the team feels about this momentum.
Totally.
Because we've got this very clear high momentum, high energy, high push. The young, was it chili pepper that you mentioned earlier?
Spicy chili pepper.
spicy chili pepper. I love that. He's come along, and we just keep hearing the Italian national anthem at the end of these Sundays, and it's a hard thing to fight against the momentum in the team. That momentum, that energy shifting towards the other side of the garage, being the dominant, the winningest side of the garage. That's the thing that I think is going to be difficult.
Totally. It's really interesting. I think like Brundle mentioned something today in the commentary saying, and I think it actually, I'm going to give myself kudos here, links back to what I said yesterday with the sprint. Kimi's probably a bit quicker, but a little bit more immature. George is more consistent, and George will have to win on consistency and just like keeping it clean, getting it done. Kimi's quicker, but he takes these risks, and like I actually think that comparison between Kimi and Max, we might really get to see that this year with George if it comes back into contention again between the two of them, because I think he is a bit of a hothead. I think he does make some slightly immature decisions, but I also think he is slightly quicker than George. So I think it's kind of the older, wiser head who's maybe not quite as fast versus like this fiery kid who is quicker, but I think takes. There's a few times today and in the sprint yesterday where Kimi could have easily put it in the wall. So I think if we do ever see George take it back, there will be some unforced errors from Kimi. There'll be some hot-headed moments, but we'll see.
I think you're so right. And the trick for Kimi will be picking his battles, because whilst, yesterday after the sprint, we were saying if he had gotten P1 instead of P2, it's just one extra point. It's not a big enough swing. So it's kind of not the risk that's worth taking. Whereas today, there's a bigger points swing potential on the table. So it's good that Kimi was going hammer and tongs after George, because today's the day when it matters.
Really mattered
but
today.
If they did take each other out, or if Kimi took himself out, then it matters even more, because the swing is even greater.
Yeah.
So I do think it's like it's fully about risk reward, and Kimi seems to be fully inclined towards the Max side of the risk reward spectrum. But it's kind of also it's so exciting. I'd much rather having one Kimi and one George than two Georges, if you know what I mean. Like having two measured, calm, steady hands. No, throw that out. I want the drama. I want the energy between them.
But George is going to be sitting there tonight feeling so many things. One, he will feel deeply, deeply resentful for the fact that his car just didn't work. But he'll also feel deeply resentful for some of the quite dangerous attacks, I think, or like kind of high risk attacks that Kimi made on him today. So he's got two things now that he's going to be feeling. Like he's going to be feeling hard done by through fate, and hard done by having a teammate who like really doesn't give a, and will, won't race in a way that is particularly kind of, you watch Lewis and Leclerc this season just like dancing along wheel to wheel through corners. This isn't that. This is more akin to Lewis and Max, or even George and Max last year. That's much more akin to that.
Or Lewis and Nico. I so agree. And I don't know, there's something interesting about that in... Like, surely that's got to also energize you as a racing driver as well.
Maybe.
If you've got tough competition, surely that's got to sort of light the fire in you as well. And if it doesn't, maybe you're not cut out for this sport, buddy boy. And like, I think if George finds himself in a negative inner spiral, kind of a la Lando first half last year. I think it's going to really suck for the season for us. Like we really need we need him to be bringing his A game. And throughout the weekend, you could say one of them was faster than the other, but it was so close between them, between George and Kimi. It was kind of amazing to see just how evenly matched they were, despite the veteran status and this kind of young pup. They're so close. On the other hand, the teammates who were not at all close to each other is just who you've mentioned, Lewis and Charles. That was like night and day. The difference
Yeah.
between those two was incredible, right down to the point at the end when they're in the pen talking. Lewis is in there going, that was the best day of my time in Ferrari. And Charles is there going, that was the worst day of my life, my worst race ever. It's like, wow. Charles just could not get he could not come to terms with the car and the circuit and the conditions this weekend. He was comprehensively beaten in every session by his teammate, and his teammate finished second, whilst he struggled to finish where he did. And they're actually only separated by 3 points in the championship.
3 points. Do you know what looking at the drivers' standings, it's really interesting. Obviously, we've got Kimi with 131. But you've got George Russell at 88, Charles 75, and Lewis 72. And even Lando you could group in there at kind of 58, like basically nearly 60. You've kind of got like a really interesting moment there. Like, just say Kimi does run away with it. Any one of the next 4 or 5, and even Oscar, you know, it's just like Kimi's taken all the points and left all the other boys with somewhere between 50 and 80. Like, he's just left them, you know, just like, you guys, you know, you boys can fight over the rest of the points, but I'm going to take all of this, please.
Yeah.
But
King Kimi, you fight over the scraps.
Do you know what? I think it's funny because we've got our first European race, don't we? Next in Monaco. Bit of a procession. I love it because I think Leclerc will come alive. By the way, obviously as he can do, and Lando. I think Leclerc and Lando should hopefully come alive in Monaco. They're great qualifiers, both of them there. But yeah, we're beginning the season where Kimi has to go back into his haunted house and face his demons. And I'm not as convinced as you that there won't be some wobbles over that, because I think, you know, neural pathways are formed. There's a lot of neural pathways that would have been formed in his brain over that season where he questioned whether he should even be in Formula One, where Toto probably questioned, did I make the right call? Because it was really, really bad, that European leg for Kimi, wasn't it? So I think I'm just so excited to see whether he can be as triumphant as he has been in the first 5 races, or whether we see a bit of a wobble. And I guess time will tell. I want him to fight those demons. I don't want it just to be easy. I don't want anything to be easy.
Do you remember last year's Monaco race where Kimi crashed in qualifying, or George crashed in qualifying, Kimi crashed in practice? So they both started like last, essentially.
I forgot that.
Yeah, so Kimi crashed in practice and George in Q2, I think it was. So they started around like 15, 16. And that was the race where they had the two mandatory 2 pit stops.
Yeah.
And so I think Kimi did 3 pit stops in the end, just to like give George some space so he could pit into it. And that was an absolute farce. I hope this year's better.
Wait. Was that the year that like Williams just swapped places all the way through?
Yeah, same race. Yeah, hilarious. The other thing about it is I think there's a real danger for George Russell that he might end up pulling an Oscar Piastri from last year. And I don't mean get ahead. I mean fail to get P2 in the Drivers' Championship despite having the dominant car.
Yeah.
And there's a risk there. I think, you know, with Leclerc at 75, it's just like 13 points behind Russell. If Leclerc gets his act together in future circuits, if he comes alive in Monaco, which I hope he does, it's always fun to see the hometown hero come good. You know, that's my hope is that one day we get an Australian driver who actually does well at Albert Park. Next year, there's always next year. but seeing Leclerc come alive at Monaco, it could be the beginnings of Russell losing not only the primacy within Mercedes, he might even lose P2 in the driver's standings. And what spirals we might see from there. Do you think that our veteran, level-headed Woody would end up making rash dives up the inside on his younger, more spicier teammate? That's something to look out for. It's
so interesting because that's what happened with kind of Max and Lewis, didn't it? After kind of Max basically bullied Lewis for nearly a whole season, Lewis decided, like,
He literally parked his car on top of Lewis.
Yeah, it was like he was fine. Lewis was just like, okay, gloves are off. Will George have a gloves off moment? Like, it's so hard to say. Like, maybe that's kind of what you've got to do eventually. Like, maybe I don't know, mate. I don't know, Jace. Who knows? I don't think it suits his driving style. I think I would, if I was George, I'd rather let Kimi make unforced errors and close the door like he did into turn 1 in the sprint and just be like, no, I'm going to gentlemanly just close the door. I'm not going to get a penalty for it. And it's team internal, so no one's going to give me a penalty. I'm just going to close the door to you. I'm going to, again, like I said yesterday, George's job is to, and I don't know how he does this now with such a dominant lead from Kimi, is to try and get under Kimi's skin and make him make a mistake, because I just don't see him pulling it back otherwise.
The sad thing about that is I don't think George has got it in him. I don't think he's got the mind games part in him. And I also don't think he's got the ruthlessness in him. In the same way that Lewis chose to fight back, but in a really limp-wristed way.
It was so limp. Yeah.
And like a younger Lewis Hamilton would have been up for the fight against and in his prime Max Verstappen.
So true.
But the Lewis that we got in 2021 just was not that. He'd been softened by his...
Too much of a brand ambassador by that point.
Yeah.
You know?
And also he'd been softened by a couple of years of Bottas not really putting up much of a fight against him.
So true. You know, and he's doing his fashion labels, and he's doing his kind of like, all his other political stuff. He was, Whereas Max is just like, I don't care about any of that. I just want to race.
Do you notice how much love Kimi's getting after he wins, though? Like, everybody just seems so happy that it's happening for him. And, you know, you see Lewis there afterwards, like, picking him up, and on the podium, he's like, hey, let's lift him up. Let's, really champion the next generation. It seems like there's a lot of love for Antonelli in the paddock, you know. And if it was Russell in that position, I don't think you'd see anywhere near that much kind of goodwill being thrown towards the young man.
Totally, he's like the little brother of the whole pack. Can you imagine, like, Kimi rocking up at the team dinners, like barely old enough to have an alcoholic drink? You know, it's like, He
only got his license last year.
It's nuts. Anyway, we should draw this to a close. It's been an amazing chat. I loved the race on one level. I hated it. I hated seeing 6 drivers out of the race. I hated seeing engines, Lando's engine and George's engine blow up, because I would have loved to have seen where they had finished if they hadn't have done. So there's things I hated about it. There's things that were absolutely brilliant. Obviously, the Kimi-George battle, the Leclerc-Hadjar battle, the Max-Lewis battle.
We were robbed of McLarens. We were robbed of two McLarens.
But we got so much drama, I don't think we can complain. And game on.